Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm here with Niall Stanage, and we are in the middle of Christmas party season here in D.C., Niall.
We are, and we're here early on a Friday morning nonetheless, so
yes.
Well done us.
Props to our dedication,
Exactly.
honestly.
Actually, I always look forward to our Friday conversations, Amber.
As do I.
I know we have a lot to get to. Ahead this morning on Rising, Senator John Fetterman lashing out at both sides of the aisle after two different proposals to avoid the dramatic rise in the healthcare costs failed their votes in the Senate.
Plus, Marjorie Taylor Greene drawing outrage from the right after meeting with the progressive charity CODEPINK. Here's how she's responding.
And Jasmine Crockett stirring up Democratic politics in Texas. The fallout from her Senate bid announcement coming up.
But first, we begin with Indiana, one of several states pressured by the Trump administration to draw new congressional maps ahead of the 2026 election.
21 Republicans in the state Senate joined Democrats on Thursday to reject the new Republican-favoured or Trump-favoured map, despite the president's heavy attempts to woo lawmakers to his side. According to the Washington Post, Trump hosted Indiana officials at the White House, sent his vice president, J.D. Vance, to Indiana twice, and held a conference call back in October with Indiana state senators trying to sell them on his redistricting plan. Those efforts seemed to fall flat, with one longtime Republican lawmaker telling the Post, quote, "Hoosiers are very independent, and they're not used to Washington trying to tell us what to do." And Indiana Republican State Senator Michael Bohacek explained his reason for opposing the new map on CNN.
It's bad policy, in my opinion, and the opinion of others. It makes the legislative process just too transactional. At least in my opinion, this is not a two-year presidency. This isn't a two-year Senate legacy. This is going to go on well after I'm gone and beyond. So let's treat it like that.
Republican lawmakers' defiance of Trump's wishes seemed to strike a nerve with the president, who posted on Truth Social ahead of the vote on Wednesday night, attacking Indiana State Senate leader Roderick Bray, writing in part, "Unfortunately, Rod Bray enjoys being the only person in the United States of America who is against Republicans picking up extra seats. In Indiana's case, 2 of them. He is putting every ounce of his limited strength into asking his soon-to-be very vulnerable friends to vote with him. He is putting the majority in the House of Representatives at risk, and at the same time, putting anybody in Indiana who votes against this redistricting likewise at risk." And Vice President Vance piled on in a post of his own, writing, "Rod Bray has consistently told us he wouldn't fight redistricting while simultaneously whipping his members against it. That level of dishonesty cannot be rewarded, and the Indiana GOP needs to choose a side." And some on the right are taking it a step further, vowing to primary those senators who voted with Democrats. Tyler Boyer of Turning Point USA writing, "Turning Point Action will be publicly endorsing opponents of the state senators who voted against redistricting today. They thought we were bluffing. No, we will educate voters and throw thousands of volunteers and staff at their local districts."
But some on the left are seeing all this as a sign that Trump is losing his grip on his party. Here's Pete Buttigieg on Jimmy Kimmel's show earlier this week.
In Indiana, the state house there, very Republican state, Republican supermajority, the President of the United States personally begging them to redo the districts, and up until now at least, doesn't have the votes. And I think that's really telling, because I think in the same way that before taking over this country, he took over his party, I think the way that his power is starting to collapse will be first within his party and then more broadly in the country.
The Hoosiers of Indiana. I was, just to give a brief credit to a rival publication, I was impressed. Politico Playbook this morning. Its headline is "Who's Your Daddy?" which I thought was I enjoy
post level.
I enjoy a good piece of wordplay in a headline. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, well, Trump, of course, is coping hard. He's since said, I really wasn't that involved in this redistricting fight, which it seems, according to all of the reporting, that he actually was, and it failed anyway. And I was talking to a very high-level GOP consultant about this, and what they said to me was, do you want to know how I know we're going to lose the midterms? Because the White House is currently attacking Republican state senators in Indiana. Like, that's where their attention is. And sure, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, but the White House is also shifting to do this affordability tour, and talking about the issue, but you've had, slight tonal differences between the president and the vice president, with Vance sort of acknowledging people's pain and Trump being frustrated with voters for not feeling the success of his great economy. And so I think, separate from whether or not the redistricting fight was just, this doesn't bode well for Republicans next year.
Yeah. The thing that I found interesting related to that was the willingness of these Republicans to go against Trump on the basis that their constituents wanted them not to do the redistricting thing. Because I think, in broad terms, what we have typically seen in the Republican Party is politicians, some of whom who may be more establishment figures than Trump is, being worried that their own constituents would be outraged or be annoyed if they didn't adopt the Trump line. Here, where Republicans have a huge majority in the state Senate, it's like 40-10 in the GOP's favor, but they still felt that no, their constituents didn't want to meddle with all this stuff, and they therefore bucked Trump to do so. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, to be fair, I think, state politicians don't have to worry about the president of the party anyway, as much as people in Congress do. But it is notable that they were willing to, and seemingly, the other part that was interesting of this is that there was a theory that they had favor traded with Maryland so that the Democrats in Maryland would not do redistricting if the Indiana Republicans didn't do it, and basically having a détente. Which has been chattered more generally across various states after the Texas and California push, where everyone's like, okay, we just all need to mutually disarm and stop this crazy gerrymandering process. And I think, if you look at this from the broad midterm view as well, it also is telling that Trump is so focused on redistricting because it tells you that they're obviously worried that Democrats are going to flip a lot of seats, and so they need to have a higher number of overall Republican seats available in order to stave off what they see as an incoming blue wave.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And if you look at the Indiana proposed map, I mean, look, I know that US House districts are drawn in very peculiar and picayune ways anyway, but it was like such an obviously, well, first of all, it was rather greedy. I mean, Republicans have 7 of the 9 House districts in Indiana to start off with. The map was likely going to give them all 9. And one of the ways it was going to give them all 9 was basically divvying up Indianapolis so that you could outweigh the predominantly Democratic vote in the city itself with more Republican voting suburbs. Things like that, I think, are just so obviously cynical that they do risk a backlash. And you're quite right. I mean, Texas and California went head to head. It was, I think, 5 seats each way there.
They canceled each other out.
They canceled each other out. And then other people did really seem to, other states, did really seem to step back from this. There were some, North Carolina, I think, did something. But the Maryland probably not doing anything on the Democratic side, and Indiana not doing anything on the Republican side, points to, I think, hopefully some lowering of temperatures.
Yeah, and I think in Maryland, the Democrat leader of the state Senate had expressed an unwillingness to go forward with the proposal, even when Governor Westmore was really pushing for it too. So even Democrats are bucking their own party on this potential trend because, if you're a state lawmaker, do you want to spend your time doing a mid-decade redistricting, or do you want to be passing legislation that your constituents really care about? Right. And I think it points to the fact that local politics is just such a different game. And often in today's political climate, people want to nationalize every election, every race, every policy. And it ends up taking more power away from the people, right? If your school board race is nationalized, all of a sudden things get really blown up and strange and not specific to the area that you're in.
As we've seen in lots of places, but yeah, absolutely.
All right, ahead on Rising, a Republican drafted proposal to address the rise in Affordable Care Act premiums failed last night in the Senate. The details of the plan and the Republican who voted against it next.
The government shutdown ended exactly 1 month ago today, with Senate Republicans vowing to Democrats that they would hold a vote in the coming weeks to address the expected spike in healthcare premiums. after the ACA subsidies were done away with earlier this year.
Yesterday, 2 votes were held and both failed. Here's what happened. The Democrats proposed what they called a clean 3-year extension to the ACA tax credits and what Republicans called a non-starter. Here's Senate Majority Leader John Thune.
Apparently, they think that a 3-year extension with no reforms to try and disguise the real impact of Obamacare's spiraling costs is actually a plan. I don't know how you can call it a plan. It's not going to do anything to address the perverse incentives that encourage insurance companies to enrich themselves at taxpayer expense. It can do nothing to address the rampant waste, fraud, and abuse in Obamacare. And most of all, Mr. President, it will do nothing to bring down health care costs.
Then Republicans put forth their own proposal. That one would have set up health savings accounts for people who buy their insurance on the ACA marketplace, and that would be done to help customers pay the new higher costs. Those HSAs would have been funded by the same money that was previously being used for the enhanced premium tax credits. Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer slammed the bill ahead of that vote.
They used Scotch tape and glue to come up with this ridiculous proposal that can't be taken seriously and does nothing to avoid the impending health care crisis. Even calling this Republican bill a proposal is generous, because the Republican bill is little more than junk insurance. It is no real plan at all. It's been repudiated time and time again in the past, and will be repudiated by the American people again.
The bill needed 60 votes to pass the Senate, and it only received 48, with every Democrat and Republican Rand Paul voting no on the bill.
After both bills failed, Democratic Senator John Fetterman called out both sides for putting forward unpassable plans. Take a listen.
Both of these bills were designed to fail, and I don't think it's really productive to have votes that are guaranteed to fail. Right now, things are designed to fail. That doesn't help anybody, and it's just more than a bunch of empty political posturing. I'm here to vote for real relief.
I'm mildly alarmed because you've got your notes out, Amber. You're a formidable enough debater without notes.
No, these are just little keywords to remind myself what I want to talk about. I don't think we're actually going to argue about this.
Good enough. Well, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I mean, I actually totally agree with John Fetterman.
Right.
I kind of love him now. What the heck is going on?
We've flipped on Fetterman,
I know,
but that's a whole other thing. Yes.
But look, the reality is, the Obamacare subsidies, for a lot of people, you're getting a benefit of up to $700 a month in reduced premiums. The Republican plan with the HSA accounts was giving, $1,200 a year in an HSA? Like, that's not even comparable. So the idea that they thought that this was going to be, like, the solution to people's healthcare premiums suddenly spiking is crazy. It was obviously never going to pass, 1. And 2, it doesn't even make a dent in the rise in premiums that people are going to experience. I also find really interesting, and I want to get your take on this too, the Republicans and Trump have really changed their messaging on healthcare. They've stopped talking about privatization. They instead are really making the insurance companies the enemy, which is a populist talking point that both the left and the populist right have been using. But now it's become mainstream in the Republican Party. To hear Majority Leader John Thune place the blame on insurance companies, that would have never happened in the Tea Party era, even maybe 5 years ago. And they are just directly ripping that messaging from the outer flanks of each party.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that is really interesting, and I see it as responsive to where the public are, by and large. I mean, people, of course, have overall differing ideological perspectives, but I think frustration or resentment with health insurance companies and the industry there is very widespread. And the idea that those people within that industry find any possible loophole to make it as hard as possible for them to pay out, that would be a problem in any form of insurance or any form of business. But because oftentimes the nature of health insurance is people are in real distress for themselves or for family members, and you've some distant person in some distant office saying, well, if you look at the fine print of, paragraph 73, part B, you'll see that we don't have to cover this. So that, I think, rightly, frankly, breeds anger at insurance companies. But you're absolutely right. It's very notable and a very marked difference to see Republicans, led by Trump in this case, really start to pin the blame on insurance companies. I think that's fascinating to watch.
Yeah, it's a huge change for the Republican Party, and I think a welcome one. Now, we could say it's cynical political messaging, but it is correct to say that a lot of the issues in our healthcare system stem from insurance companies. And one that you didn't mention that I'd also like to say is there's this firewall between the amount that healthcare actually costs and what the consumer pays. And so people don't even really ever see how much, they don't feel really how much people are actually charging, because the insurance company obviously covers, negotiates, et cetera, before that final bill gets to you. And the other thing that I've noticed with the Republican messaging, and don't worry, I'll criticize the Democrats.
Yeah, I'm sure you will. But please,
well,
go ahead. And criticize the
earlier this
Republicans.
week, I was watching Fox Business, and there was a GOP congressman, and I can't recall his name, but he was talking about these competing plans. And he mentioned that they are trying to, quote unquote, fix Obamacare. Not replace, not repeal, fix. Fix Obamacare. They've totally conceded the fight on the Affordable Care Act. Ever since that infamous John McCain thumbs down, Republicans have just totally neglected, rejected the idea of trying to get rid of the ACA. And to me, it seems almost inevitable that we're going to eventually move to a more strongly run government healthcare system, because we're seeing this fight right now with the subsidies. Once you give an entitlement, it's really hard to take it away. Republicans don't want to get rid of the ACA, but they acknowledge that it needs to be fixed. The HSA plan failed. It just seems that's the direction that we're moving. And I would say too, on the HSA plan, HSAs are great. They're fantastic. You get great tax benefits, but it's not a realistic way to, in a large national system, to ease people's burden.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think about the only point of difference we probably have is our overarching view of the ACA. It would, if I was designing a healthcare system, obviously that's not what I would do. I'd just have universal healthcare, as most of the rest of the world does. I think that the ACA worked to expand coverage to a reasonable degree and was criticised at the time for being too left-wing, and there was Sarah Palin and the death panels and all that kind of jazz. But look, where we agree is, I think that public frustration with the current system is so acute and so widespread. Nobody would really design a system like this if you were designing it from scratch. And ultimately, it will, I believe, end up in more of a single-payer system, because while every system has its downsides, that seems to me obviously the easiest and most simple way of doing it, and it cuts down on the profiteering by insurance companies, making money out of people's distress.
It just seems like right now we have the worst of both worlds. I was on an exchange healthcare program a few years ago when I worked for a British company, and oh my gosh, my premiums were like $1,200 a month, and I'm a young, healthy person with no comorbidities. It was absolutely insane. On the Democrats, the final point, they were the ones that passed these subsidies. No Republicans voted for it. Now they're mad that Republicans are the majority and they don't want to extend the subsidies. It's like, come on, get real.
We shall leave it there. Jasmine Crockett's Senate bid has turned the Democratic primary in Texas upside down. We'll talk about that next. Don't go anywhere. So it looks like Jasmine Crockett's decision to enter the Texas Senate race has shaken the Democratic primary. Former Representative Colin Allred, is he a former representative? I thought he was.
He is.
Is he? Okay. I thought he was still there. Anyway, he dropped his Senate bid to run for a House seat.
Now, Crockett is set to face off with State Representative James Tallarico in the Democratic primary. Tallarico has built his campaign by reaching out to Republicans and independent voters, while Crockett is gaining steam through her viral attacks on President Trump.
Meanwhile, tension is brewing between Mr. Allred and Democratic Congresswoman Julie Johnson, after Allred decided to run for Congress in Johnson's district. Allred announced his bid, writing on X, "It's official. I filed to run to represent the newly drawn Congressional District 33. I'm humbled by the opportunity to fight for the community I was raised in, by my single mom, and where I'm now raising my family. On January the 6th, I was prepared to physically fight to defend our democracy.
Johnson shot back in an ex-post, writing in part, "Women should never be treated as placeholders for men who fail to advance. Women deserve to have a real voice based on our own values, our own work, and our own record." At a moment when women's healthcare, economic security, and basic freedoms are under relentless attack, this endorsement is a reminder that leadership should be about results, not political gamesmanship. And I think she's referring to the Emily's List endorsement she received shortly after Colin Allred jumped into the race. She's also had a number of subtweets. She's retweeted people who were talking about Colin Allred because she's been in this district, although it is newly redrawn. She's pointed out, I'm from North Texas. I've been representing North Texas. Colin Allred decided to drop out of the Senate primary, and now he's basically punishing a Democratic incumbent and forcing them to spend money on this race that really should just be Julie Johnson, I think.
I think so, yeah. I mean, I think it is a tricky thing because of the redrawn boundaries. But Allred, I think, does face a vulnerability here in being cast basically as a carpetbagger or as someone who is trying to
and
oust.
A loser.
Right,
because he lost the Senate race to Ted Cruz.
Right, by 8.5 points, I think, right?
And then drops out just before the filing deadline when Jasmine Crockett announces that she's running.
Yeah, and now it's this situation where, trying to oust a pretty progressive, certainly by Texas standards, female Democrat, that seems questionable to me. He may do it. I mean, he is obviously well known in part because of that Senate race against Cruz, even though I'd completely forgotten he's no longer in the House of Representatives. But it's just interesting to see these tensions that are set off by a combination of the redistricting and the Jasmine Crockett decision, which has sort of exploded things in all kinds of ways, right?
And I'm curious to see who the Democratic political machine supports, because maybe there's an argument for this district is more competitive now and we need a more moderate candidate. So she's received a lot of endorsements from these progressive, issue groups and PACs, but the Democratic National Committee has not said nary a word.
No, and this gets to the whole issue that is also present in the Crockett bid, which is whether you're better in Texas, whether it's statewide or in a newly more moderate district, to be a more moderate figure, or whether people like Jasmine Crockett can fire up the base to such an extent that they can draw new voters to the polls. I'm broadly sympathetic to Crockett. I'm not sure that math works in the statewide race.
Well, right, and Republicans love this because they're worried about if Ken Paxton gets the nomination. He's more of a conservative firebrand. He also has a lot of scandals. Is it harder for him to win a general election than John Cornyn? Yeah, probably. Now, if Jasmine Crockett is the opponent, they don't really have to spend as much money. It's sort of a foregone conclusion that Republicans would win.
The dynamics of the race change for sure.
The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development slamming illegal migration as the reason for skyrocketing housing costs. Stick around. As housing continues to get more expensive across the country, the Trump administration says illegal immigration is to blame.
The Department of Housing and Urban Development recently released its 2025 Worst Case Housing Needs Report to Congress. It says in part, this year's report shows two realities. The first is that economic growth has been insufficient to lift the wages of low-income renting families high enough to make rent affordable. The second is that national macroeconomic policies, such as record immigration, have combined to drive sustained high rental demand, which has continued to place upward pressure on rent prices.
HUD Secretary Scott Turner recently appeared on Fox News and slammed the Biden administration for its immigration policies that he says are making homes less affordable.
During the Biden administration, the immigration policies crippled our nation. Over 12 million illegal immigrants or illegal aliens came across our border, really stifling our housing affordability and supply issue in our country. And when you have this many illegal aliens coming over, taking homes that are supposed to be for the American people, affordability is automatically going to go up.
This is, of course, not the first time Republicans have blamed the Biden administration for the country's housing troubles. Here was J.D. Vance making similar claims last year in his vice presidential debate against Tim Walz.
We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this country, which does drive up costs, Tim. 25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership.
But those on the left are disparaging the new HUD report and accusing Republicans of failing to enact real housing policy reform. Erin Reichlin-Melnick, a former immigration lawyer, writes, quote, "The White House has been hammering this message as they flail on affordability. Quote, nothing at all is our fault, while literally everything is the fault of undocumented immigrants, a group whose numbers we keep claiming are higher and higher every time we need a bigger scapegoat." Meanwhile, Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren says, quote, "We are in a housing crisis. Trump has said he wants to lower the cost of housing. So why did his allies in Congress stop a bipartisan bill that was designed to do just that?"
The senator was referring to the Road to Housing Act, a comprehensive housing reform bill that supporters were hoping would get included in the National Defense Authorization Act. It did pass through the Senate, but was thrown out in the version of the NDAA that was passed by the House on Wednesday.
A lot in this topic, Amber. Initially hearing about the HUD report and seeing that Fox interview, my initial instinct was to think, oh, this is like scapegoating. And then I thought, well, let me check myself here, because on the surface, when Vance talks, for example, he claims there are 25 million illegal immigrants. Other estimates are lower, but for the sake of the hypothetical, he says, well, there are 25 million people, though they're driving up prices. The Trump administration's policies cracking down on immigration has stabilized or lowered prices. That does not, on its face, sound implausible. I then went on and spent a couple of hours looking through various statistics, and to my mind, the numbers don't really bear that out, particularly when it comes to the claim that the Trump administration's crackdown on immigration has stabilized or reduced rent prices, because the numbers involved, like obviously they haven't deported 25 million people, right? They've deported about 600,000. That in a nation of 340 million people seems a very small number if you're actually claiming that that's what has changed rental prices.
Yeah, I don't think they've had success yet. I mean, the HUD report points out that it's all foreign migration, illegal immigration being 30% of that, which has driven up rent prices, is responsible for 60% of the increase in rent prices nationwide. And they claim 100% in New York and California. Again, that's all migrants. So the illegal immigrant question is a smaller proportion of that, but still significant, right? And I totally agree. The Trump administration has not deported enough people to bring rent prices down and say that that's the reason why that's happening. But it is, I think, important to point out that when you bring in, millions of people, it's a supply and demand question, right? It's a basic law of economics. You have more people vying for the same number of homes. Homes have not increased. The supply of homes has not increased enough to outpace the number of new arrivals that we've had in the past 5-10 years. So, of course, prices will go up because of that. There's also a lot of blue states and cities that have offered free housing to illegal migrants, which inevitably drives up the prices in other places. There's also a policy under the Biden administration where Afghan refugees were getting FHA loans under less strict terms than American citizens that the current HUD secretary has undone at the beginning of the Trump administration. They were basically not doing full credit checks. They were getting some preference for some FHA loans. And so when we're talking about the America First Trump policy, it makes perfect sense to me that this would be a message that they would want to hammer. The impact of either prioritizing or giving benefits to people who are not American citizens, while American citizens are bearing the brunt of a massive housing price increase.
That's interesting. I just want to get back to the supply and demand issue that you raised, because I think that is really important. And to my mind, it goes to some of the complexities of immigration. Because even if you take Vance's 25 million figure, that's about roughly 7% of the total population. Now, then so that's part of the demand for housing. But there's also how housing is supplied, i.e. by the construction of new homes.
Right.
And a lot of estimates, I mean, there's some differing estimates as to how much of a proportion of the construction industry is comprised of illegal immigrants. But around, most of the estimates cluster around the low 20s, like 1 in 5 construction workers is roughly an illegal migrant. So therefore, let's say, Stephen Miller becomes emperor and every single illegal migrant in the country is thrown out. You have reduced the population by 7%. You've reduced the people currently working to construct new homes by about 20%. And so now you and I have, I think, some similar feelings about illegal migration and its effects on labor law practices, but it's not just as simple as the demand side being reduced. You're reducing the supply side as well.
Yeah, totally right. And J.D. Vance addressed this in a New York Times interview shortly after the election. And he was asked this question by the host of, well, aren't you going to have housing costs increase because you're going to have to pay American workers a higher wage, or there won't be enough construction workers generally to build the new homes that people want to see? And his response was sort of sardonic, which was, yes, you're right. In the 60s and 70s, when we didn't have all of these illegal immigrants, nobody was building new homes. And of course, that wasn't the case. There were Americans working. And he pointed out that there's a much lower labor force participation rate now, especially among young men who would be the prime people who would be working in those construction jobs, who either have been priced out of the industry or have left because they feel disaffected or whatever it is. Yeah. But we used to have a labor force participation rate of 75, 80%. It's in the high 60s to low 70s now. There's roughly 3 to 4 million people who are out of the workforce and are of prime working age to do those jobs. Now, I take the point that they would be paid higher wages, which would increase, the cost of building the housing. But I think the mass deportation would outweigh the potential rise in how much it costs to build those homes. And broader, I would say on the supply issue, there needs to be some deregulation because it is very expensive just to get the permits, et cetera, to build a home. And this is part of the left-wing abundance agenda, actually.
It is, yeah, no, that is definitely part of the... We're being told to wrap, but I'm going to overrule that because I do want to make one very final point, which is in relation to housing, which is a very complicated issue. One thing that doesn't get mentioned enough, in my view, when it comes to rental issues is the massive expansion in corporate landlords, corporations that own a massive number of properties. We don't like them. No. The number of single-family homes owned by corporate landlords has increased from 10% in 2010 to 26% in 2023. That obviously
Blackstone, get out of here.
Anyway, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I wonder will she draw us together as well? She's drawing the ire of the Conservative right after meeting with a progressive activist group. Why she says she met with CODEPINK coming up. Stay with us.
Erica Kirk has one word for Candace Owens: stop. That's what she said in a recent town hall with CBS News editor-in-chief Bari Weiss.
Owens has continued to question the official narrative surrounding the assassination of Charlie Kirk, suggesting that the alleged shooter, Tyler Robinson, didn't act alone. And Charlie Kirk's widow, Erica, said she has had enough of that.
What do you want to say to her and the other people that are putting these lies out into the world right now?
Stop. That's it. That's all I have to say. Stop.
Some people online pointed out that Candace Owens had previously suggested she would stop discussing her theories about the assassination if Erica Kirk asked her to. But here's what she said in the most recent episode of her podcast.
So Erica would like me to stop lying, and I would like to honor that, okay? I can only honor that if Erica is more explicit in terms of what I have lied about. What did I lie about?
Owens continues to anger some on the right with her comments as they argue she's hurting the conservative movement. that Charlie Kirk and Turning Point USA helped build. Fox News host, or former Fox News host, I believe, Meghan McCain, says what Candace Owens is putting Erica Kirk and the people at Turning Point through is nothing short of demonic. And conservative podcaster Tim Pool says Candace was telling people she hated Charlie Kirk a few months before he was murdered. It's all an act. She hated Charlie and now wants to destroy his legacy.
In the same interview, Erica Kirk also responded to people justifying the death of her husband. Let's take a listen.
You're sick. He's a human being. You think he deserved that? Tell that to my 3-year-old daughter. You want to watch in high res the video of my husband being murdered and laugh and say he deserves it? There's something very sick in your soul.
All right, Candace Owens.
Yes.
Where shall we start?
Well, I'm watching all of this as something of obviously an outsider from the online right, and I'm therefore watching these shenanigans between various prominent figures there with some perplexity. It just seems very peculiar to me, the whole thing, and her continued propagation of, seems to me, pretty wild conspiracy theories about Charlie Kirk's killing. The clip that we played, I did think interesting because she seems pretty blatantly to be moving the goalposts, having previously said that she would stop if Erica Kirk asked her to. Erica Kirk asks her to, and she says, well, yes, let me just add a few more conditions. That doesn't seem very honourable to me, but I'm sure you have many more things to say about Candace Owens than I would.
Yeah, so I think what happened here is that there were people who had questions about the official narrative, quote unquote, of how Charlie died shortly after it happened. And Candace Owens saw that as an opportunity, seized on it, and has created this wild, meandering conspiracy theory that has like 8,000 moving parts that she has provided evidence for none of, and continues to present as if she's the only person seeking the truth. She's the only one who really cares about Charlie, and she's the only reporter. She's a reporter now, apparently, a detective. She's Detective Candace. She's the only one who can get to the bottom of all of this, and the FBI is lying, Turning Point's lying, Erica Kirk is lying. It's just gotten to insane levels. I mean, let's just take one of the claims, just for people who are like, you didn't watch the show.
Yeah.
Well, I know that she is contesting the idea that Charlie Kirk was killed with a .30-06 rifle, because the .30-06 round could never have been lodged in the neck. It would have had to go through the back of Charlie's neck. And so that's why it couldn't have been Tyler Robinson on the roof with the .30-06, like we're playing a game of frickin' Clue. Gun Twitter, of all places, Second Amendment Twitter, has been destroying Candace for this claim.
Okay.
I have talked to several law enforcement sources who have seen all kinds of ballistics in their careers. It is absolutely possible that a .30-06 bullet, when fired from an elevated position, could get lodged in the neck. And it's actually not that uncommon. It's not common either, but it's certainly possible. And it's not, something that 100% of the time the .30-06 round goes through the neck, and therefore he couldn't have been shot with this gun. So, like, that's one of the crazy claims. And then we've got, like, the Egyptian planes and the office in Delaware, and I just find it interesting how Candace always has all of these sources she has all of these high-level military sources, and this guy Mike is emailing her, and she has all of the evidence, and she's checked his claims, and she can confirm that they're valid, but she doesn't actually explain how she confirmed that they're valid, what evidence she actually has. It's always just, well, they told me this, and I checked it, and I promise you guys it's good. Like, there's no journalistic process happening here, and it's just so frustrating. Erica Kirk also appeared on Fox News with Harris Faulkner, where she talked about some of the conspiracy theories in greater detail and was obviously quite hurt and wounded by the insinuation that her Turning Point USA family was covering up the real cause of Charlie Kirk's death. And it's gross. And I think, if people want to watch the full Tim Pool rant, that was pretty indicative of how I feel about it. which is that what she's doing at this point is evil.
Yeah, I think that the casting aspersions on TPUSA, with, as far as I am aware, no real evidence, does seem in very poor taste. Now, obviously, Charlie Kirk's views would be diametrically opposed to mine in almost every respect. It's still appalling that he got killed, and I think that the bereavement and grief of those who knew him, and I know you knew him to a degree, is obviously considerable, and that shouldn't be mocked or made light of, and nor should it be exacerbated, as it seemingly has for Erica Kirk, by Candace in particular going around with these pretty unfounded theories that seem to me to be designed to be never easily disproven, because she always has secret sources who she's not naming, who are telling her that. I was speaking on this topic with Robbie in a episode of the show earlier this week, where we cited quite a good CNN interview that was done with Candace, where she was pressed on how she knows these things.
The Allred interview.
Yeah, and it was just completely vague in her responses. So I think that's obviously
like, I just
problem.
know. I just know.
Okay, then.
I know. Yeah. Okay, well, no further questions, Your Honor. It's insane.
Yeah.
She also claimed at one point that she believes he was shot from like the front row of the event, or that he was shot from behind. She's constantly moving the goalposts, and like, I know people are going to be like, you didn't look at all the evidence that she looked at. Oh, sorry, I don't have Mike from the military in my email inbox, but I did. I read the charging documents. I have watched all of the video angles of Tyler Robinson allegedly on the stairs, on the rooftop, coming down from the rooftop. Yes, I've read the supposedly faked text messages between him and his boyfriend. And I've watched probably 30 to 40 videos of the actual assassination. There's a compiled basically list on the internet of every angle and every like cell phone video that was taken that day. So there's a video from the left side of Charlie, from the right side of Charlie, from the middle of the audience. There's the official Turning Point live stream video. There's videos from up on the balcony overlooking what occurred. And the fact that those are available and Candace is still thinking that the round came from someone in the front row, or saying that on her podcast at some point, is just completely idiotic. Yeah, it's absurd. And of course, Turning Point offered her the opportunity to come to this live stream that they're doing in Arizona, where they are going to one by one address every single one of these claims. And she responded to the invite by saying, anytime, anywhere, I will be there. I can't wait for this. And then naturally, when they revealed the time, she comes out and says, I can't make it because my husband's family is coming in from out of town and I can't find a babysitter. Or actually, that's during my podcast. Okay, it's during your 2 p.m. podcast that you have spent the last 3 months talking solely about the Charlie Kirk assassination. You now have this opportunity to do probably the biggest event of your career, actually sitting on stage with the people that you believe are covering up the real cause of Charlie Kirk's death, are happy that Charlie died, and you're not going to go to the live stream because that's when you normally tape your podcast?
Yeah.
What?
I know. I mean, I think those are all fine points. And I'm curious about a couple of things still in all of this. One, and I don't know if you even want to weigh in on this or not, is it would your best bet be it's a knowing grift, or do you think that Candace does actually have some belief in these things herself? Impossible to tell.
Both, maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Erica Kirk said on this Fox News interview, pointing out she's making hundreds of thousands of dollars probably an episode.
Well,
yeah.
Well, that's what I was.
There's certainly a grift element to it, but when you hear these projections of how she is like the sole fighter for truth, she's the only one who really cares about what happened to Charlie, and all the people around him were using him and secretly hated him. It's giving narcissist. It's giving delusions of grandeur. And so is she just effing crazy? Like, yeah, maybe.
Because, I mean, she's obviously been this like massively controversial figure for years and years and years and years. And that massive controversy, it seems to me, has propelled her to greater and greater prominence in many ways. And I'm just curious, because I have nowhere near the knowledge of the internal dynamics of the online right that you do, whether this whole furor has isolated her in any way that is fundamentally damaging to her career, or whether, to the contrary, the appetite for sort of conspiracy theories and, aha, we know the secret and it was Israel and there are Egyptian planes involved and there's blah, 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 whether the marketplace, the public appetite for that is so great that she'll be fine regardless of what Erica Kirk or Tim Pool or you or anyone else say.
I'm curious about that too. And one other interesting facet of this is that Nick Fuentes has even attacked her.
Yeah.
Right? So there's like the battle of the independent, like sort of fringe podcasters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think it is important to just go back to her sort of origin story. When she was in high school, she had sued the school district for alleged like racial bias and harassment. Then she creates this left-wing website that she calls Social Autopsy that's dedicated to basically canceling people. And then like a year later, suddenly she is red pill black on YouTube and then gets pulled into the conservative movement. And I think I've shared this story on the show before with you, Niall, but I have always known she was a liar because of this story I wrote. She came to me saying that BuzzFeed was threatening her employees, and I've just put this together. It was the exact same tactic that she is now using to spread the conspiracy theories about the Charlie Kirk assassination, which was being deliberately vague so that things couldn't be fact-checked. She told me that I couldn't talk to the employees who were allegedly threatened because they were underage at the time that they were working for the website. Okay. But they weren't underage at the time that they were allegedly reached out to by BuzzFeed News, and they're not underage now, so why would it matter that they were 17 years old
at the time,
5 years ago when they were working for your website? But nonetheless, she says I'm not allowed to talk to them. I ask if there's any voicemails, email evidence of these supposed threats, and she says, I'm not going to share that with you. Okay, right. So I go to BuzzFeed and they send me their request for comment, and it's a standard request for comment. And I'm like, this woman just was totally trying to use me to advance this narrative that she has no evidence for, probably never happened, and thought that I would be stupid enough to run along with it without seeing firsthand any of the evidence myself. Good. And that's exactly what she's doing now. Right. It's the same exact thing.
I love this story. I'm glad you told that, actually, because it does provide a real insight into how she operated in that case and how she apparently continues to operate.
It's like dangling the carrot and then snatching it away.
But it has obviously worked with journalists or commentators who are frankly more gullible than you are, because I assume that some other of the claims that she has made in the past have got more traction and have served to prop up her profile all this time.
Sometimes you sprinkle in some kernels of truth and, muddies the waters a bit. Yeah.
We're not very pro-Candace here,
no.
but there we are. We have a lot more to talk about on Rising. Stay with us. SZA is the latest artist to find herself clapping back at the White House. She retweeted a post from her label's head, Terence Punch Henderson, calling out the recent wave of videos from the Trump administration that use artists' music without their consent. Punch's post wrote, "Trying to provoke artists to respond in order to help spread propaganda and political agendas is nasty business. Knock it off." SZA added, "White House rage-baiting artists for free promo, is peak dark inhumanity and shock and awe tactics, evil and boring."
This response was prompted by the White House account on X posting a video of ICE officers in military clothing arresting people said to SZA's song Big Boys. The post featured the caption, "We heard it's cuffing season. Bad news for criminal illegal aliens. Great news for America." White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson responded to SZA's criticism, saying in a statement, "Thank you, SZA, for drawing even more attention to the tremendous work America's ICE officers are doing by arresting dangerous criminal illegal aliens from American communities."
This, of course, comes just days after Sabrina Carpenter criticised the White House for using her song Juno in an ICE raids video without her consent. Well, I don't think they should really use songs just to aggravate people, but they obviously do so. I suspect maybe of all the big topics we've discussed today, this might be the one that we have a stronger disagreement about. I guess, the one sort of serious objection I have to this, beyond just, how you use musical artists' music for political purposes, is that I do think it's sort of a piece with quite a kind of trolling attitude. You know, there's this stuff that seems partly intended to engender the kind of responses that we've seen. Then there are those Department of Homeland Security memes, which are typically, you know, I don't even know how to describe them. It's always white people thrusting forth as representatives of what real America means, capturing the homeland. And I find that kind of attitude a combination of sort of tiresome and ominous, but I'm sure you have a very different view of it all.
I am questioning of the idea that the White House is intentionally picking artists that they know will respond. To me, it seems like the White House is very keen on using TikTok and trending songs and topics on TikTok in order to draw attention to what they're doing. And the reality is all of these artists have snippets of their songs floating around TikTok and being used as these featured audio clips that people place on top of videos so that they are, you know, in this section of trending topics. And the White House has a bunch of young millennials and Gen Z people in the communication staff who are keenly aware of this. And so they are picking songs that are massive, that obviously go with the videos that they're sharing thematically through the, you know, small snippet of lyrics they're using, of course. And so it seems to me like if you have an industry that is probably 99% liberal, we're just only allowed to put Kid Rock songs on the DHS videos? Like, is that what we're talking about here?
You know, I think that the main thing I would say pushing back against that is there's a difference between you or I or any individual being on TikTok and using trending sounds, as people do, to try to sort of make the videos better and boost engagement with those videos, and being the White House and using songs for videos that, you know, by their very nature are going to be contentious. I mean, we could get into the whole debate about the ICE raids, but the point is nobody, not even in the White House, doubts that there's going to be controversy around them. Now, in a previous era, there would be debates like this around the use of music at campaign rallies or in TV ads. Now there's a debate around the use of them in things like TikTok videos or videos posted to X. And to me, even though the media landscape has changed so vastly, there is still the same fundamental question, which is the use of an artist's music to further a political point, even when it's in contravention of that artist's wishes.
I feel like even unless you have a copyright claim and someone's playing the full song on YouTube, you don't really have a leg to stand on. And people's music all the time, people's art all the time is used for purposes that they might not approve of, and they're welcome to speak out against it. But to suggest that the White House is not allowed to use it because they're worried about contentious videos, I think just seems really unfair, I guess. I'm not sure how else to describe it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is they have, legally speaking, the right to use it. The question, I think, is whether it is fair or reasonable to co-opt these artists into sending these messages. I would argue that even if it is legally possible, I think it is, I mean, of course we can't get into the White House's minds, but I strongly suspect it is in fact done with the intention of sort of inflaming these kind of rows and then drawing more attention to the whole thing. Though I would note that in the Sabrina Carpenter case, they did in fact take down the video that she objected to, but then they later used her music or cited her in some other means. So it was a little unclear where they ultimately came down on that one.
I recall the statement that Abigail Jackson gave in response to the Sabrina Carpenter kerfluffle, and it was quite funny because she had pulled some lyrics from some of her other songs in the response and kind of used it against her, which was quite clever. And Abigail, I think, is the same age as me, and so we're like we know about that pop culture space, and I thought it was good fun.
Well, despite us having different views on this, I do enjoy the good use of the word kerfuffle, which I think should be used more often.
All right, that's going to do it for us on Rising Live. Thanks for joining us. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thanks, y'all, and we'll see you next week.